So for starters, as the question has already been asked, what is a professional penetration tester? It's a hacker that does it with allowance. We can hack a client that we have agreed upon, and we test their either web application, website, their internal network, external network, their IPs, whatever we agreed to test up. And we do it in as unharmful way as possible, meaning we are ethical. We try to not destroy a website. We just try to find the vulnerability and prove its existence. If we find some interesting data, we will not dump everything. We will not publish everything or anything that we find due to our SLAs and other agreements. But we will just take a proof so that we can show our client that their vulnerability actually exists and that it could be exploited. Because there are a number of theoretical vulnerabilities that do exist, can be harmful, but do not have any public facing, do not have any inputs. We do not know that they were actually exploited, because not all exploits are being searched and found by hackers. Some are also by researchers, and those are usually also significant, can be very severe, but does not mean to be exploited. So our case study title is Riding the XSS Wave from Vulnerability to Reversal Ride. It's a case study presentation. Due to confidentiality reasons, we cannot say exactly which site it is or which company it is, but we'll show you what happened, how it happens, and what the vulnerability actually is. Does anyone here not know what an XSS vulnerability is? Okay. So this usually starts with client giving us a request that they want us to test. As said, penetration tester, this is what we do. In this case, a client has developed a new application and decided that they want to make sure that it is safe to be used and wanted some outside opinion of its security. This is how it usually starts. We have a product that we want to make sure it's safe. If ethical hacker finds a vulnerability, it's being discovered and has a much higher potential to be fixed without actually being exploited, meaning without doing any harm. So our response is, we presented a web application pen test where we would test the application for non-vulnerabilities and then write a report with our findings along with all the vulnerabilities found and proof of concept of the vulnerabilities were applicable and recommendations on how to remediate this vulnerability. So we had our first challenge. Hackers have time. Ethical hackers don't have time. If a hacker finds some application that it interests him, they have weeks or even months to try to find vulnerabilities. We do not have such luxury. We are usually bound to a few days, perhaps 2 weeks, very rarely more. So there's a big time constraint on our side that black hat hackers don't have. On the other side, the application that is newly written has a lot of potential attack vectors. Every vector can potentially be exploited, so it is important for us to test as many as we can in the allocated time. And since it happens that applications that we test are already published and already in use, we have to do our best to keep the uptime, meaning that the application or the product that we're testing stays accessible to all of the legit users that would be using it while we're testing it. So we did a pen test and did a report. The most critical vulnerability we found was in XSS, and as seen below, we have given them a simple, non-harmful proof of concept that the vulnerability exists. But there was another problem. The way we presented the vulnerability was in a way that is not harmful, and it was the same way as the client perceived it. So they were thinking like, okay, we have that vulnerability, it's a pop-up. So what? But there could be more than just a pop-up. Pop-up is just the usual way that this vulnerability is presented. So our next challenge was to find a more harmful demo without actually causing the harm. So Elijah, would you please show us a demonstration of how we usually do the non-harmful cross-site scripting demo? We have done a local website on the left, which is a victim's computer, and on the right is a hacker's computer. And we have done a test website to present you how we test or prove the vulnerability. So as mentioned, cross-site scripting vulnerability is the vulnerability where a website does not validate user input adequately. And in case of some HTML code or JavaScript code, it actually takes the input, and presents it on the page. As seen here, Elijah entered a pop-up or an alert with a proof that we were here. So it's a pop-up. But as said, the client believed that this is a non-issue. So Elijah, could you please show us the worst-case scenario of a cross-site scripting vulnerability? In this case, Elijah was gonna use another vulnerability in conjunction to obtain a stored XSS, meaning he's gonna write a comment, and every time anyone gets onto a website, this comment will load. Because it is a script, it will not be shown to the client or to the regular user, but it will be conducting everything that Elijah will write in. In this case, he made a reverse shell. So now he has access to a victim's computer and can do everything a victim can do in her or his command prompt. And even more, thank you, Elijah, because it is a interpreter shell, it can even open a webcam. It can search now for everything else on the network and hack other devices on the network through this device. As seen, we're even getting the processes that are running, everything, the computer name, files, folders. He's now at liberty of him and ingenuity, because we presume there is some antivirus solution, but copying files through this way is a legitimate way. Sometimes it can even be adding more viruses, some crypto viruses, they're most common, as hackers usually use crypto viruses mostly to hide after they're done, not to start with a crypto virus. So now that the challenge was done, the client now understood the possibility of the severity of the problem and decided to add additional user input validation, meaning that the website will check what user will input. For example, if you have a field where a user has to input their phone number, there's absolutely no way to put any special characters in. A plus might be the only one. Or if you have a date, It doesn't have to be 60 characters long. And they also conducted additional security measures on the server to check for possibility of other errors. So the results were that their website, or web application in this case, is now safer. It's not a guarantee that no vulnerabilities exist, but it is now much safer since it has been done, it has been pen tested through outsource to a third party, which is not trying to hide something. In some cases, it happens that companies have internal testing, and they're like, yeah, okay, hide that vulnerability. That's not really high. We'll fix it. Just hide it. But if you have a third-party pen tester, it is much more objective. So the consequences of a successful cross-site scripting attack are usually somewhere between the pop-up that we've shown and a reverse shell. If another application or website uses cookies with inadequate security flags, a hacker can steal that cookie, and if that site uses the cookie as the only thing to authenticate user, a hacker can then log in as that user with his rights and his access. Since JavaScript runs in a browser, a hacker can inject a script and hijack the victim's browser. Meaning what you type can then be traced, can effectually a keylogger. Additional scripts can also be added in to the browser for like download Java updates. Log in to Windows, a simple pop-up that will show, and a regular user might just think, okay, I have to log in because I lost network access for a moment, and now I have to re-authenticate for a network share. And user inputs their credentials, and now a hacker has a domain user account. Also, defacing websites, so presenting them otherwise than they should be, triggering and redirecting user to a victim to another website and then back, and stealing data there. Or, as said, in the worst case scenario, gaining the access to the machine. And if you might think that these cross-site scripting vulnerabilities are just theoretical, because the usual way that pen testers show them are just a simple pop-up. But as seen in the news, it can be several hundred millions of fines, and you have to consider that if such breach has been conducted, a company that was breached has to spend additional resources figuring out what happened, how it happened, fixing the problem, and restoring the state that it was before to get to the functional state. So the cost here of 138 million pounds for British Airways is just a fine. Their actual cost of breach was much higher. Thank you for your attention.